All right, here we go. I'm Mr. Pike. We are doing Chapter 9, The Man in the Jippy Joppa Hat from The Great Horn Spoon, one of my favorite fourth grade classics. In case you wonder why I'm wearing this, if you're watching this video like 5 years from now, 2021, and we're still kind of in the middle of the COVID season, and I have this face shield obviously for that, and I wear it up here, because if I wear it down here, it pinches my nose and I can't breathe. So I know I look pretty ridiculous. But that's okay. We're in school. Chapter 9. The Man in the Jippy Joppa Hat. Follow along. It was about a week before Praiseworthy and Jack reached the diggings. So they're finally reaching the diggings. The diggings is where they're going to dig for gold. So think about it. We're halfway through the book, and they're just now getting to dig. And here's where it gets even more exciting. They had caught the 4 o'clock riverboat at the end of the long wharf. Dr. Buckbee came to see them off, but he was staying behind in San Francisco. "I'm going to wait for Cut-Eye Higgins," he said. "He's bound to turn up with my map. I'll meet every ship that comes in until I get my hands on that scoundrel." That night, in their stateroom, Jack polished his horn spoon. I love showing off my horn spoon. I eat yogurt every now and then with this when I forget one of those plastic ones. Praiseworthy had let him buy it on the wharf with a pinch of gold dust. Finally, Jack tucked it inside his left belt and looked at himself in the mirror. All he lacked was a red flannel shirt and a floppy hat. A beard was out of the question, at least for the time being. He glanced at Praiseworthy. He wondered what his partner would look like with his whiskers grown out and a revolver in his belt. Praiseworthy was as tall as Quartz Jackson and as straight as an awning post. There were even sun creases forming in the corners of his eyes. Yes, sir, Jack thought, Praiseworthy would make a fine-looking gent. Their adventure in barbering had paid expenses nicely. There was gold dust left over, and Praiseworthy had poured it into the little finger of his left white glove, which is not a bad idea, because if you got gold dust, you got to put it somewhere safe. What safer place than in your little pinky finger of your glove? For safekeeping, he'd made a list of the gold camps the miners had bandied about, and now he studied the names. Chili Gulch, Grizzly Flats, Timbuktu, he muttered. They sounded like dreadful places to take a growing boy. They sounded glorious to Jack, though. "Don't worry about me, Praiseworthy." "Well, I'm thinking about your Aunt Arabella. What would she think if you were writing from a place like Bedbug or Whiskey Flat or Hangtown, Angel Camp? She might approve of that. But they say it's a fearful place. Let me see. There's Rough and Ready, there's You Bet, and there's Humbug, not to mention Rawhide, Roaring Camp, and Cutthroat. Well, what'll it be, Master Jack? One place sounds as bloodthirsty as the next." "Hangtown," said Jack. "Then Hangtown it is," said Praiseworthy. The following morning, Jack saw Indians for the first time in his life. They came to the banks of the river to watch the crowded boat and listen to the ringing of its pilot-house bell, and Jack stared back in fascination. Wouldn't his sisters Constance and Sarah be frightened? But that night, when the flat-bottom riverboat got stuck on a sandbar, Jack felt a little uneasy himself. What if the savages came aboard when the passengers were asleep and helped themselves to a few scalps? "Oh, stuff and nonsense," Praiseworthy smiled, shaving himself at the cabin mirror. "The steward tells me they're digger Indians. Quite tame. They dig for roots and acorns and are a menace to nothing but wasps and grasshoppers, which they consider a delicacy." With one sandbar and another, it was 2 days before Sacramento City came into view. A shore cannon went off, raising a cloud of dust to announce the arrival of the boat. Townspeople flocked to the river. Praiseworthy and Jack carried their packs and shovels, gold pans and carpet bags through the crowd. It was the end of June, and the valley shimmering with heat. Wood awnings stretched over the storefronts like eye shades. And as they walked along, Jack kept gazing at the mountains, the great Sierra Nevada. They stood dark blue and purple against the hot morning sky. That must be where the gold was, Jack thought, and fresh hope shot through him. They were almost there, weren't they? Now, this is especially exciting for our 4th grade class because in actually a few days, next Monday and Tuesday, we're going to Coloma and we're going to be panning for gold ourselves, so we're pretty lucky. A stage was leaving for the mines at 2 o'clock. To raise their fare, the butler and the boys had no choice but to sell off a pick and a shovel. Mining tools were in great demand and prices were astonishing. The pick and shovel bought $100 each. After paying their stage fare, Praiseworthy poured the gold dust left over into the tips of all 5 fingers of his left glove. He had difficulty getting his hand in, but he made it, and his left hand felt as heavy as an anvil. An anvil is a big metal thing they used for pounding metal down, and it was like they would pound and they could shape things on an anvil. The dust was their grub stake, and he had no intention of losing it to some rascal along the way. "We ought to carry a gun, Praiseworthy, a 4-shooter. Oh, there's no time for that now, Master Jack. They were the last passengers to board the stagecoach. They had hardly taken their seats when the driver, a bandy-legged man in old buckskin, snapped his whip. The horses bolted and they were off to the diggings. Jack was squeezed in beside Praiseworthy and a red-faced man wearing a string tie. He was quick to introduce himself as an undertaker. "Fletcher's the name, gentlemen. Jonas T. Fletcher of Hangtown. Now, I don't mind telling you that business is brisk in my line of work up there in the diggings. Glad to meet you. Yes, sir, socially or professionally as it may be." Does anyone know what a undertaker does? They look after people's graves. So they set up grave sites and things like that. Not the kind of job you may want to do. In the seat opposite sat 2 Frenchmen in brand new jackboots and checked shirts with the creases still in them. Between them, the opposite Jack, so that their knees almost touched, sat a man in a dusty linen suit and his hat pulled down over his face. He'd been sleeping that way from the moment Praiseworthy and Jack had entered the coach. "Don't see how a man can sleep on the road," Jonas T. Fletcher laughed. "Maybe he's dead." "Ain't that a fine-looking jippy-joppa hat he's got? Must have bought that in Panama. I come across the plains myself, clear from Missouri." Jonas T. Fletcher droned on. The team of horses raised red clouds of dust, and Jack watched the passing sights as best he could. They overtook an ox-drawn wagon loaded with stores for the mines and strings of pack mules. The man in the fine straw jippy-joppa hat slept on. A large ruby ring glistened from his finger. With jostling of the stage, his coat fell open, and Jack could see the butt of a dueling pistol tucked inside his belt. It was almost an hour before he woke. His hand rested on the pistol, and he tipped the hat back off his face. He looked straight into Jack's eyes with the faintest of smiles, as if he hadn't been asleep at all. Jack very nearly jumped. It was Mr. Cut-Eye Higgins. All right, so we'll end it there. Till next time.